So, what is it that makes somebody a good listener? Is it the effort they put into understanding you, being present, making you feel heard? Or is it just their ability to know when to talk and when to just shut the fuck up? So, today in this video, I wanted to go ahead and dive into that topic with you and really just try to explain how we can be more understanding and empathetic by just learning to sit back and listen for once. Now, with that out of the way, I'm sure we've all had a time in our lives where we vent about something bothering us to somebody we trust. A friend, a lover, the neighborhood crackhead you paid to listen to you as he continues to I fuck your catalytic converter. Whether it's our relationship struggles, finances, stress, or depression, we ultimately feel one of two ways afterwards. Either a million times later, or like we just got fucking curb stomped onto a Waffle House toilet seat at 3 a.m. So, what and where is that dividing line? What leads us down each path, and what traits and attributes are needed to actually make somebody feel better when they open up to you? In my opinion, the biggest one at the end of the day is simply empathy. What makes a good listener isn't somebody who just repeats what you say and responds occasionally with, damn, or that's crazy. It's somebody who actually gives a shit about what you have to say and understands the feelings you have and can actually put themselves into your situation. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to spell out your guts to somebody just to be invalidated at the end of the day due to one reason or another. So, how can we avoid doing the same thing to those we care about? Firstly, we can start by learning to shut the fuck up. I feel like oftentimes we all make the mistake of feeling like we have to constantly butt in with something to say, especially after every sentence, and give advice whenever somebody is venting to us. The thing is, chances are the person venting to you already knows how to solve their own fucking problems. What's important to understand is that most of the time, they're not reaching out for you to be their problem solver. They're reaching out to you to feel heard at the end of the day and get the validation and comfort they need to help relieve the pain and the stress they feel. When I first got with my partner, that was a mistake I made often. I've always been one to want to immediately correct any issue that surfaces. So whenever she would open up to me, I would respond with shit like, well, did you try this? Have you thought about not doing that? Why don't you talk to yada yada yada? Point is, it never gave her the comfort she needed in those moments because she already knew how to fucking fix it. In the end, it really just made her feel infantilized, and to be honest, it was just kind of patronizing. Like she wasn't a grown ass woman who knew how to solve her own fucking problems. And once I made that conscious effort to sit back and listen actively and really just acknowledge her pain, she would come out of those situations feeling a lot better in comparison to all those times where I would just give unsolicited advice. Really, it's just important to determine what it is the person you're talking to needs early on. And so this is where we step in and ask the real question of, would you like me to give you some advice that could help? Or do you just need me to listen to you rather than just straight up assuming what our partners need? So yeah, at the end of the day, let the other person be heard and let them pour out their emotions without constant interruptions so they can release some of their negative energy. That way, they can walk out of it feeling lighter instead of axe murdering the neighborhood cats or something. I don't know. Just learn to shut the fuck up. Now, with that out of the way, and moving on to the next topic, the second area people fuck up when it comes to being a good listener is arguably one of the most important areas actually showing that you give a fuck. In other words, people suck at active listening. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean people neglecting the basic shit like eye contact, giving their full attention, not actually digesting the words the person venting is actually saying, or really just making them feel like they're not being listened to at all. So, how do we fix this? We can begin by introducing something called reflective listening. Reflective listening is an amazing tool because it literally proves to the person venting that you are actually invested in the conversation. So, with reflective listening, what you essentially do is repeat the words the venter says back to them. For example, if somebody says, my bitch whore of an ex wife Susan took the kids after telling me I'm a bad father for gambling away the rent money, you, as a ventee, then step in to say, I'm sorry, man. I can't imagine how much it sucks seeing her take the kids away from you, especially since it was because of your gambling addiction. I mean, gambling hobby. Yeah, gambling hobby. You see, paraphrasing what the venter says achieves two things here. A, it confirms what they're saying so you can get the information right. And B, it shows that you're making an effort to understand them as a whole. Going back to what we talked about earlier, this not only helps them feel listened to, but also comforted in a sense as well, because of the fact somebody is making an effort to actually understand what they're going through. It really just makes them feel less alone in the end, which is why we need to strive to implement reflective listening a lot more in our lives. Apart from reflective listening, another way we can show that we are invested into their conversation is by asking open ended questions as well. Like, how did this happen? What are you feeling? What else is going on? By asking just a few good questions, it will allow people to further elaborate and digest their own feelings to not only help process their emotions, but allow you to better understand their perspective as well. This will help you out so much in the long run when you combine these two skills together. You're going to function so much better when you're put into a situation where you need to basically be a ghetto impromptu therapist. And one personal experience I had that really went on to show how useful these two skills are was whenever I had to deal with combative psych patients during my time as an EMT. Oftentimes, these patients would be absolutely belligerent, pissed off, and refuse any transport, regardless of the fact that they had an emergency petition or no matter how much they needed the medical services at hand. Now, how did I go about convincing them to get the help they needed? It was actually by sitting down with them and listening to the shit they were scared of instead of nonstop berating them or shutting them down immediately. And one of my favorite examples of this was this wonderful schizophrenic who I talked about in one of my previous videos. Since I obviously can't bring up her name, I will be referring to her as Miss P. Now, to give some background, Miss P was a feisty woman with a fury of 1,000 suns, packed into a 5 foot package. After being locked away in our local hospital's psych ward, Miss P had received the news that she would be transferred to another facility, and EMS would be taking her. To say the least, she was not a fan of that, and to say that she was angry would be an understatement. After arriving at the hospital and walking into the psych ward, the first thing I was met with was Miss P screaming at the top of her lungs, with a voice I can only describe as a coked up Hulk Hogan, about how she was not going to be probed and imprisoned by the feral demonic lesbian nurses at said facility, and how she would rather go out fighting like a lone samurai against a wave of Mongols than to admit defeat. After hearing Miss P verbally assault the nurse who kept telling her she was being ridiculous and she had no choice but to go, Miss P then redirected her attention to me and stared at my partner and I with a death glare as I introduced myself. Miss P then went ahead and screamed her deep guttural Hulk Hogan roars of anger before I stepped in and said, "Hey, it's okay, Miss P. Tell me what's going on." After that moment, by offering to be a listening ear, Miss P was able to begin venting. As she told me she did not want to be probed by any of the lesbians or women at that facility, and how she found the mere sight of anything remotely resembling a vagina absolutely revolting, I just sat back and listened to her and repeated shit like, "I hear ya, Miss P. I can imagine the thought of getting probed by angry lesbians is definitely scary, and I understand where you're coming from." Instead of immediately shutting her down by telling her she was being ridiculous, what happened? What happened was, when I allowed Miss P to vent her frustrations and not try to convince her she was being crazy, she became much more receptive to what I had to say. Shortly after, I let her know that we can ensure she would not be probed at this facility, and that I would let the facility know that the angry lesbians would not be authorized inside of her room. Miss P then let her guard down and got onto my stretcher before blessing it with hand crosses and incomprehensible prayers before we left. During our transport to the facility, I asked Miss P a lot of questions and allowed her to speak her mind in a setting without judgment, and holy fuck did that change her demeanor. When I previously had an angry schizophrenic lady who was ready to suplex the next lesbian she saw, we walked into the facility with a reformed Miss P who made sure to compliment my female partner and show nothing but kindness to the facility staff. Miss P, my favorite schizophrenic, was at ease, and all it took was just sitting back to listen. So please try to listen to all the Miss P's in your life. Moving on from that, the last thing I want to cover is some basic stuff to avoid. Starting off, when listening to somebody, for the love of God, please don't ever just respond with basic ass sentences like, "damn, uh-huh," or "that's crazy." A lot of the times, it just comes off as disingenuous and like you're not actually invested in the conversation, since you're just sitting there making incredibly low effort inputs that don't really add anything of value to the conversation. Oftentimes, this just makes it so the other person feels like the topic they're opening up to you about isn't really worth listening to, or doesn't matter at all. Another thing you really need to try to avoid too is shitty body language as well. Try to make an effort to make eye contact as much as you can and do some subtle things like leaning forward whenever they say a particular thing of interest, or just nodding your head, or keeping your body face directly in front of them. One huge tip that helps me a lot of times is just straight up mirroring what they're doing as well, albeit a little more subtly. For example, if they're doing a lot of hand movements during a particularly passionate moment, do the same with yours. It'll subconsciously develop more of a rapport between you two. And it's a technique that's underrated as fuck, honestly. But with all of that over with, I really hope this helps you at least a little bit. And whether it's consciously shutting up more, actually making more of an effort to understand the people you speak to, or really just not being a low effort asshole with your responses, by actually combining all these techniques, you'll be able to become somebody people want to open up to. Now, with all that out of the way, I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video.